Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote that I picked just for this podcast. It is easier to find men who will volunteer to die than to find those who are willing to endure pain with patience. Julius Caesar. My dear friend, Eddy Perez is back. The man, the one and only, founder of EPM, friend to many, bringer of the American gift, member of the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks for coming back.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. Wow. Chick-fil-A just comes to mind when I hear that now, every time I hear that. And then I actually never associate. You say that often. Where did that come from?
Chick-fil-A 20 years ago, 30 years
Holy
ago,
cow.
because I grew up in Atlanta with it. I thought it was a more respectful way instead of saying you're welcome. I understood what they meant from it. Just like, if somebody really wishes something upon you, to ask you to do something, not that you say this every time, but in those bigger situations, if you would say something like as you would like or as you wish, it's just a higher level of respect that you bestow on the other person.
And 20 years ago?
Oh yeah, 30 probably. 30. Yeah. Chick-fil-A. The first standalone Chick-fil-A outside of a Chick-fil-A actually was open in my high school district off Northwood Hills. And I knew people that worked there in high school. So yeah, it's almost been 30. Yeah, I'd say about 30 years. I think the first time I heard that was somewhere around 1993. So yeah, I started using it shortly after that because I thought it was just kind of mind blowing.
Why? Why?
Um, I don't know. I just think it's more respectful. I look, if somebody says you're welcome, I don't think they're. Um, I mean, I guess maybe the usage of the language instead of saying you're welcome to you when you're saying my pleasure, then you're showing them. I just think it's a higher form of respect. It's just that basic.
Was Chick-fil-A always, were they always on top of it, even back then?
With what? Their culture?
Yeah. Just the
Yeah.
whole enterprise. You've been going there 30
Well, you
years.
got
So like, what was the
well, no, that
evolution?
was the standalone. I went to the ones in the malls when I was a kid in the 80s. I mean, it was like anything else. I think it evolved as a business because they were, like I say, they were not in the standalone business like they are today. They still have plenty of locations in malls and other places too, but they were kind of a mall concept, kind of food court concept, and they transformed into, what is now seen as the most effective drive-through, and even their own niche of fast casual, as it's called. It really is something that they have carved out in what they call, based off that same book. It's kind of their blue ocean strategy.
Why do you think it's the most effective drive-through?
You ever been to one?
I'm yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so there's always like 30 cars in there. Isn't that the fastest 30 cars you've ever seen disappear out of a line?
What do you think it is?
Um, I don't know them in particular. Like, I don't know people. I've known a couple people there, but never. I don't know their systems. I don't know it. I mean, there's something to be said. Everybody they hire, even out of the high school kids that they hire, I think it's just one of those how the system is set up. You don't see a shortage of workers there either. So it's not like you see, now in the drive-through, you have somebody who walks up, takes your order, takes your credit card, since that's how most people pay, and somebody else, because of how they merge the two lines, make sure it's you. And
Hmm.
then even when you pull up to the line, you have people inside and outside, and the outside people is taking it to multiple. I mean, anytime something's already done, they go ahead and deliver it. So even if somebody's waiting on one item in one car, that's going to shift. I mean, it just shifts out the cars just really fast. There was a joke. I don't know if you heard this. They said that they should have ran all the COVID testing lines. It wouldn't have been so long.
Yeah, that's funny. In when you were in college, did you do any fundraising or any type of work per se, or any type of team collaborative, in the spirit of Chick-fil-A with your fraternity?
We did a lot of fundraising for Scottish Rite, not for and Scottish Rite. Sorry, I'm so used to everybody when I say that knowing what it is. It's the Children's Hospital here in Atlanta. It's now been changed. I think it's now called Children's Hospital of Atlanta, CHOA, yeah, Children's Hospital of Atlanta. But Scottish Rite was the name back then.
What did you learn from that time?
Fundraising's hard. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever have to do is get people to give up their money and not run away from you. I also believe it's the greatest form of sales, what I would say true sales training, because it's a lot of rejection. It's a lot of people not wanting to talk to you. It's a lot of people thinking, are you really putting my money to good use? If I had $1 for every time in some of the fundraising in college, I was asked if this money was going towards alcohol, I'd be a pretty wealthy man. So, I mean, you're constantly in an uphill battle, and to fundraise, you have to show that you have a passion for something. Because if not, then you really, it's already tough as it is. I mean, you have so many obstacles against you, so many walls, natural walls that are put up by people, because people get hit up for everything. So you have to understand where they're sitting at. However, if you have a deep passion for it, then you can build a system and you can overcome and you can do quite well at it.
How did you get everyone to participate?
That's where I'll give the fraternity a lot of credit. It was already built in. When I was a pledge, I had to go do stuff. And as a brother, you ask people at that point, and some people would do it, some people wouldn't. But that's where it was part of the duty of, I'm really dating myself on this one. Who knows what they do today? However, back then, the vice president, one of his jobs was basically his biggest job was to make phone calls once or twice a week to what I would call rally the troops, to let them know what was going on, to effectively communicate, and then to ask them, will they be attending these events? Now, someone would tell you, yeah, I'll be there, and then they wouldn't show up. However, it was a system that was put into play.
Did you do that?
I did at one point have that role as vice president of the fraternity. I did.
Do you think that shaped you?
I could say yes without a doubt. A lot of things have shaped me, especially in the fraternity. But yeah, it's funny you bring that up. Hadn't even thought about that in so long, because that's vice president. I did become president at one point, and so did a lot of my closer friends. That's who I became very close to in the fraternity. Was all of us served anywhere from treasurer to vice president to president at some point in time. A lot of lower positions too before, raising, as they would say, the hierarchy, or as I like to say, going towards the basement, from associate to leadership to what essentially is effective leadership. I mean, executive leadership.
Yeah. What did you learn from being a part of a community, a culture at that stage in your life that you think you apply today?
Well, there's a lot of things I learned. In particular, that's when my mom got very sick with cancer. And, I had been used to a decent sized family coming together to support each other. But essentially everybody before they knew each other outside of, some people would know one person in the fraternity. I knew one person had gone to my high school that was in there, but I didn't really know him in high school that well, enough to know who he was by face. However, it's strangers, essentially. It's people that are coming together that have many differences, but also a couple of key bonds that bring them together. One of it being, the search for camaraderie. I learned that, that was probably the first place I ever learned about not just behaviors that drive you and how to prepare. However, it also was, they, the fraternities have creeds. Creeds are powerful. The fraternity had essentially what you see in the business world of beliefs, core values and what they meant and what they meant differently to everybody. So that's where I would say I saw the first formalized group of individuals with their own sovereignty, but seeking something together that's bigger, that's more important, that they're representing, that went all the way to back into the 1800s. So it's not like the fraternity was at that point in time young. At that point when I joined, it was the 125th year anniversary. So and it dated back with a lot of rich history.
What was the history?
Well, one of the founders fought in the Civil War of the fraternity I joined. They were all military men. The other ones were younger. They were military men. Virginia Military Institute is where they came out of. That is part of the Marines today. So there was a lot of teachings also in the fraternity about military duty. One of the three values. The three values were love, honor, truth. And you'd always hear in that order. That's how people always said it: love, honor, and truth. You'd hear people say LHT. I mean, even some people had that tattooed on them, not just their initiate number, but they'd have LHT tattooed on them. And it went down to a lot of things like, the Bible that was given to one of the founders that he considers a spiritual awakening for himself. After they were in Virginia, which was right at that line of north and south, and it had been very ravished. Not as ravished as where I grew up, as we all know the history now. And Atlanta was burned to the ground. However, they were all trying to get their bearings because it was founded in 1868, officially 1869, January 1st. However, they came together October of 1868 at that military school to form their own fraternal order. So a lot of military, a lot of seeking of more deep awakening within yourself.
Wow. Why do you think it's important to know the background, to know that, to be a part of the history?
I think if you don't know your history, there's that famous cliche line, if you don't know your history, it's doomed to repeat itself. I'm not sure if that's completely accurate. What I will say is though, if you don't know your history, you kind of don't know where you're going. So it's not that it won't repeat itself, but there are behaviors that repeat in people that do evolve. However, you can pick it up. It's how the behaviors that Churchill picked up on his many predictions of no appeasement to Hitler and how that worked out. It takes a certain studying, but I would say in the fraternity, you just, you want to know where you came from and why. I mean, I think it answers the infamous, did you answer the why? I think it answers the why they did what they did and why you can feel like you can be a part of it. Because outside of, once again, stereotypes, I'm not going to sit here and say that fraternities don't get together and throw parties and have fun. There's a whole lot more, as what they say, we are a family that has to run certain aspects like a business, though. That's the first place I ever heard that was in the fraternity. And now you see that in a lot of work cultures, and that's a culture that I believe in, that you're a family, but you have to run aspects of it and run it like a business for the family to excel. And that's the first place I learned that as well.
What did love mean in that creed. So love, honor, respect, truth, right? Love, honor, truth.
Love,
Go,
honor,
let's
truth.
go through each one.
Um, they were all, they didn't put like, you've got to do X to live love, you got to do X. There was no like behavioral drivers to them. It was what they consider the three most pillars of a human. They believe it was also the three most pillars of life, and they believe it's also the most internal spiritual awakening is needed, and all three are the ingredients. Is basically they viewed it as a formula. So love is what you perceive love to be. I mean, they always said love thy love thy brother. It was a brotherhood. Um, in the brotherhood, there was also sweethearts, not that would officially join the fraternity, but would get recognized. So there was definitely that connection there. Um, so that's how the love was kind of interpreted. You know,
If you and your fraternity brothers were running a drive-through of Chick-fil-A, how well do you think you would have done?
well, like anything, we would have, like them, stumbled at first, gotten each other's bearings. However, I would say if it's the group of us that are very close, that still were on the edge of going on I'm pretty sure it's our 19th guys trip in a row. We've never missed even during COVID. Few people have missed here and there for like life circumstances, crazy things that have happened in the group. But if it was this crew running it, I think we'd run the Chick-fil-A drive-through pretty good. I mean, I think we'd run the whole Chick-fil-A pretty well. We had a very distinct, different personalities, but a strange chemistry that really bonded us, which was just on the basic of wanting to see something improve and get better and go to the next level.
Yeah, so let's unpack that. Distinct, different personalities. What makes that important to running that Chick-fil-A effectively to you?
Well, I think in anything, you got to have diversity of thought. If everybody thinks the same, it doesn't matter if they're the different genders or look differently. Your chance of success have been diminished because you don't have people that you hear, like I say, these cliche sayings, buck the trend. You have somebody who plays devil's advocate. You need those things. You need the people that even challenge everything just to challenge it. You need that sort of chemistry. You also need, one of my buddies that you've spoken with.
Mm.
You need those people that are idea machines. He would come up with. I mean, he was constantly thinking of ideas to improve the fraternity and do it. I mean, you need the idea machines. You need that creativity. So I think people would have different roles if they're running a Chick-fil-A. Somebody wouldn't have to be the store manager. Like anything else, there's multiple shifts, so multiple shift managers, multiple different positions. Who runs this part, who runs that. I mean, I think they would distribute well the leadership needed.
How about the communication?
In what sense? Us?
Yeah, brotherhoods run Chick-fil-A.
We didn't have a shortage of communication. That was not, you never heard out of our group and even out of the whole fraternity, I don't know what's going on. I'm not getting enough there was plenty of communication.
All right, why?
It's just how the system was built. Like I said, there was somebody who literally spent every week, once or twice, calling, pounding the phones. I mean, pounding the phones. We're not talking about text messages. We're talking about calling people at their parents' house a lot of times. That's before cell phones. So dads would pick up if they lived at their parents' house. Because I went to a smaller community school. If they went somewhere else, you may have had where three fraternity brothers lived together. So you would sit there and get a hold of them. Everybody in the fraternity house obviously knew what was going on. It also had a central location, so people would come, and there's a lot of information that can, especially in those days, Ironically, I think with less technology, I actually think communication was more effective back then because you only had a couple means and you had to do them. Now it's like, oh, I didn't see the email or the text, or my notification didn't pop up. Oh, heaven forbid, my alarm didn't go off this morning electronically. I think that technology, like anything, has made people too comfortable. It has made people more effective, but sometimes, just like anything, the simplicities and the basics are what get the results and really drive everything.
Did you guys have gatherings?
Oh yeah. I mean, we had a meeting every Tuesday, come hell or high water, every Tuesday, except for during the summer. It was on Sundays, but come hell or high water, you had every Tuesday. Planning sessions, going over fraternal business discussions, everything.
What did you learn from that?
It had good organization. I think their structure was good. The president couldn't vote, could influence, but I think that's the difference between influence versus force. You know, they couldn't force certain things and cram things down your throat. Um, and there were some healthy debates that went on because to get in our fraternity, it required a 100% vote to get a pledge. So even if one person voted against it, and there is one infamous situation that went down where there was only about 5 or 6 of us that no matter what would not bend to let this one person in. And some of the more, you know, some of the other popular guys in the fraternity were demanding it. And we didn't bend. And we didn't throw down because we had that rule. We had that rule. That was one thing. I saw one fight in the 5 years I was in college and in the fraternity. Not tolerable. People got suspended too. Was not part of, I'm not gonna say there wasn't some heated moments. I'm not gonna say there wasn't some pushing, but if you came to blows, it was instant suspensions and you were brought up for further suspension or expulsion if it was bad enough. It just wasn't really tolerated. I heard other fraternities and people would tell me how much they fight, but you know, you can have healthy disagreements. You don't have to go to blows, especially if you're on the same team. It's not like it solves anything. I know that people aren't saints, though, and especially at that young age. And also say if some alcohol is induced. But if I could sit here and say in 5 years I only saw it once, then there was a very clear line that that was a boundary, like you could not enter.
Hmm. Wow. What about, larger gatherings? Did that happen
Oh,
at some
yeah,
point?
we had two. We had two a year. We had two.
Why two?
So it's when both times, because it's when you had the new executive teams, the new leadership teams would get announced. So you had spring formal, which was always like mid to late May, and then you had the Christmas formal that was around Christmas. So the winter term in the fraternity, which was winter and spring, which is always the slower part of the year, that really gears up for fall, was a little bit of a shorter term. You were like mid-December till mid-May. So what's that, 5 months? The next one was 7 months because summer going into fall. Fall's what you would call hot seasons. Fall's where you can change the most dynamics. That's where the new recruits come in, and like anything, new blood invigors old blood as well as ignites new opportunities. And that's when, also from intramural sports, that's where that's where football was played. So that's always, flag football was a very popular sport. Not that there wasn't, volleyball and other sports played at that time. However, those were some of the big sports that played. It was that new energy. You hear it, you've seen it right now. Oh, we're going back to school. It's that kickoff. It's summer, but it's going into fall. So
Hmm.
it's that, like the new year. That's kind of the calendar year would start. So yeah, we would have those gatherings. We'd have Christmas formal here in Atlanta, where I went to school. Somewhere in the area in the city, it was like, one day, one night. And what I mean by that is people may get together Friday, hang out for the weekend, but it goes. Um, one in Florida was always the wild one. That one, everybody would leave Thursday and not come home till Sunday. And then it started expanding because then the school system moved to semesters. So by the time I was leaving, some people were getting down there on Tuesday, staying till Sunday. Some people were getting down there on Wednesday, staying till Sunday. So it started to expand on the length of time.
Why was it so important to gather, you know?
I mean, like anything
What
else,
is
you're
it?
blowing off steam.
Yeah, like
Blowing off steam. It's a fun environment. It's almost like a celebration, is what I could say. There's a lot of well, on top of that, the big awards are announced as well at just- each of them have a different. Sorry, my phone is dying. Each of them had a different kind of purpose. The one in spring is where we would announce the sweetheart of the year. Not spring, excuse me. The one in Christmas is where the sweetheart for the organization, the head one, and that was the biggest award outside. And then in the spring, we had all the big awards, like the ones that were named after people. Uh, that's where the presidents would give out their president's award, as they called it, to who they felt was the most impactful during their term. I mean, we had from athlete of the year, philanthropist of the year, brother of the year, man of the year. I mean, there's a lot of awards. Plus, that's when I guess the way you could put it is Sweetheart Court would get announced. You know, so it was a big deal. It was a big
wow.
part of the culture.
Yeah, if it was a business, like what grade would you give it?
When I got in, we were we had been an organization that had done very, very well for a long time, and the people before us got complacent. So when I got there, we were probably at a B, I would say, because our rival was doing better than us at that time. And then by the end of it, I'd say we were an A because we had, as we said, brought back the pride into the organization and restored the order. And I think that's why we still have that special bond, because it was all of us leaders and that really went through that run together and dealt with it. Because we also weren't the same year. That group of friends of ours were all different classes. None of us were in that we hang out. Yeah, none of us were in the same pledge class. It was just it was a consortium, or maybe one was, but it was just a consortium of time put together.
Uh, what why do you think you guys still meet every year for the last, 19 years?
That's a very, what I could say, special group to me. We've all been there together for each other. When my dad died, even my buddy Josh Potter found a way to call me from Africa when he was doing military training for this country and leading people. It's just a very special group. We were boys to men together. We got in there as young adults, not knowing that much about life, different backgrounds. I grew up on the saltier side. Some of them came from, up middle class, not wealthy, but upper middle class, to understand that dynamic. I hadn't really, I'd seen that dynamic, but I didn't know that dynamic that well. So I think it's just so we don't lose touch with each other. I think it's really important, because we've all had our lives. We've all been spun in different directions. Not everybody lives here. Actually, most of them don't. Most of them are coming in from Oregon, Colorado, Virginia. Um, Josh is back in Africa again. He's training right now, so that's why we have to plan around it. But yeah, a couple of us live here, but think about it. Just out of these 7 or 8 of us, it's not even half. And mind you, most of the people either were born in Atlanta or got here at a very young age. I mean, like young age, like under 5. So Think about that. All these people moved away, and pretty much all of them, this is home. They still all call it home. This is their home. However, they're not here anymore. Different reasons.
Hmm.
I think you lose touch. I think you lose the connection, the bond.
In closing, what do you want people to take away from this idea of the fraternal culture?
I think a lot of the great aspects of it can be brought into any culture. I think the way the founders envisioned it and the way they built it and the way the structures were laid out no different than any organization. Um, I mean, it's even set up that way because it's not set up as a nonprofit. Forgot the codes, but it's, the fraternity is set up as a no profit organization. And they even have annual, like every 2 years, there's what's called a grand chapter where there's on the national level, people come together and meet and do things together, and vote on the business of the fraternity and things that are going around and everything of that nature. So I think you can bring that to any organization. I think that there's a lot of things that could be brought upon. I think, you can't go seek consensus as a leader. However, you couldn't be a dictator in there either. There were some things that the executive team could make an executive vote on, but it was limited. Most things had to be brought to the chapter for vote and for discussion. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you that when the leader presented it in a certain way, a lot of people didn't latch on and maybe tweak it up, but vote in favor? Or if they didn't vote in favor at that point, you had 75%, 25%, and you knew where you sat. So you can't really lead on consensus of trying to get 100% buy-in, but there is a formal way that when you disclose it, even if the 25% grow resentful, they at least knew. As much as they'll try to say, well, you didn't listen to me if it didn't go the right way. Well, life's like baseball. You're going to strike out. You're going to make mistakes. So I think there's a lot of knowledge that can be brought to it. There's a lot of structure. There's a lot of values. Like I say, the fraternal order was the first place that I learned about core values and ours in particular, and then how you had to demonstrate them. Did you follow the honor code? Did you seek the overarching truth? Those are all things that the founders were very curious upon, and it was just bestowed on us. I think those are things that if people are curious in your organization and you create those core values, those beliefs, and then you have drivers, you can really, really, you know, not just envision something, you can actually metaphorically put pen to paper and get that to occur in real life.